Hello students, welcome. Today we'll learn about writing the research proposal, and in this lecture I'll try to tell you how to write a research proposal, what are the components of an ideal research proposal, and how to go about selecting your problem for the research or dissertation work. Most of you in your postgraduate program will have to do a dissertation work towards the end, and some of them would actually be going in for research studies as PhD scholars in future. So for this you need to know how to come up with a proposal for dissertation work, and then how to write your proposal, how to choose a problem, how to identify various components that go into making a research proposal. So are you ready for the class? So students, the objectives of today's lecture are to tell you how to choose your research problem, what goes into finding out a problem that is suitable for your research. Once you do that, how to draft your ideal research proposal. Now, before we start understanding how to write a research proposal, one needs to know what and why a research is done. What is research? Research is nothing but an investigation of a problem in a very scientific manner. The discovery of solution that advances the state of knowledge in areas from theory to prototypes to experimentation to applications to a wide range of things. That means the discovery of a solution. Research usually do research either to investigate an existing problem in a very systematic way that is replicable, or you will try and understand or discover a solution for an existing problem by way of adding new knowledge or by way of coming up with a new theory or things like that. But why at all research is done? Research is usually done sometimes to invent new things, or for leading edge discovery, that is to find out something of a phenomenon, a reason for a phenomenon, or to be a scientist. A scientist usually researches and then transfer discoveries to benefit of the society. You also do research to actually see how a particular discovery or invention can be ideally transported back to the society for general public use. Then one thing is that research today is also a very interesting and rewarding area for work. So how do you choose a research area to work on? First of all, you need to consider what excites you and interests you most. Second, it should be a very important problem area, an area that has a public health relevance, especially since you are all nutrition students. The idea of choosing a research problem should be concerning with an existing nutrition problem that affects larger group of people and general public health. Then research type is suitable to you and matches your skills. So you could be still doing a public health related issue, but if your interest lies in lab based work or in vitro studies, in that case you should be choosing something that is relevant to your skills. If your skills are good in public speaking or interacting with people or finding out working in larger community, then you should be choosing public health related areas, and similarly many such areas. So it all depends on what your skills lie in, what your interest lies in, and what should be the problem that you should be looking into in the context of the larger public good. Then comes identifying a research area. So once you consider your strengths and weaknesses, then you need to go and identify the appropriate research area. To identify a research area, first you need to do some amount of exercise, either by reading current literature, current research, and what are the latest happenings in terms of academic interest and academic research that has taken place over the past few decades or centuries, and then what has happened and what has been contributed. And then take courses to attend seminars and colloquia. By attending many courses, many seminars, you will also have the advantage of listening to people of wisdom, and then talk to academics, researchers, and others in the area. Once you faintly have an idea of what you want to work, you go and discuss with your teachers or academics or researchers so that you understand the area in a broader way. Then you read widely to understand. As I said, you should know what is the research, what is the current knowledge generated, and where are the gaps. To understand that, you have to read the literature thoroughly. Then learn about yourself, what you like, as I said, and what your skills are. Then try to solve some research problem. Then you will be able to determine what research problem you want to work on and what you want to solve or what new knowledge you want to add. I hope you all know Albert Einstein. You know what this great scientist once said? No problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. So if you know that there is a problem, you cannot solve with the same knowledge that there is a problem and it exists. But instead, what he also said is that the very formulation of a problem is often more essential than its solution. So you know that a problem exists, but how you formulate the problem to find a solution is itself half solution found. So that's what Einstein said. Einstein said the formulation of a problem is often more essential than the solution itself. Then research proposal. What does an ideal research proposal do? An ideal research proposal tries to introduce your readers or your research supervisor or your funding agency about the proposed purpose on which you want to work. Then it specifies direction of the research project you are planning, in what way you want to go. And then it persuades a funding agency. If an ideally good, well-written proposal usually persuades a funding agency to fund you or invites partners who want to collaborate because it appears like a worthwhile exercise to them. A good, very well-written proposal usually does this. And then it helps you determine your focus and it clarifies what is involved in your project and plan its development. So through an ideal research proposal, you can plan each and every step and each and every problem that you anticipate during the course of research. So a very well written proposal is a must before you go ahead with your research work. Now that's the reason why many people say a well written research proposal means half the war won. So before writing a research proposal, do you need to be an expert in the area? Yeah, to an extent, yes. But how do you become an expert in that area? If not an expert, at least you should know what exactly happened in that area before you ventured into it. So for that, you need to read research papers. Use papers references to get to original papers. Keep an annotated bibliography of papers. Note main contribution and open-ended questions, the questions that have not yet been answered, and how it relates to your interest and your work. Then, as I said, you should talk to experts when they visit your university, college, at the conferences or in the workshops. So that's the reason why students are encouraged to participate in big conferences, either national or international level conferences, because that's the place where you come across many of the well-known people or many of the senior scientists and senior academics who have worked in the area of your interest. And that's an opportunity to rub shoulders with them and talk to them. And you should attend talks and guest talks and seminars and things like that. Whenever you do so, carry your notebook and write down your thoughts so that it gives you some amount of background for your research proposal formulation. Then question previous work's assumptions. If you question previous work's assumptions, two things happen. Either you get clarity on what has been done earlier, or if your question is not answered, that question itself could be a reason why you want to pursue that particular problem through your research. So let me show you the outline of a research proposal. A research proposal ideally contains the title, introduction, objectives, methodology, expected outcome, ethical considerations, duration and time frame, and then budgetary estimates. Now I'll try and explain each one of these components to you to write a good proposal. What should be a title? A title should succinctly present the information about the study. In a cursory look, the reader should try and understand what you want to try and work on. It should clearly relate to the broad areas of nutrition for mother and child, for instance, or for nutrition or for anemia. It should clearly relate to the broad areas of nutrition. It should be concise and very informative. It is better to avoid abbreviations and formulae as part of the title until and unless it is a must. Otherwise, abbreviations and formulae are not very welcome in the title. The title should be as simple as possible, as crisp as possible, as short as possible. Some people they usually consider questions in a title. Can this particular intervention solve anemia problem in a particular area in India? Ideally, questions are not a good way of writing a title, but it is acceptable in some places. However, I recommend that it should be an affirmative sentence as a title. Then introduction, background and rationale. So in the introduction or the background and rationale, what you write, you concisely introduce the topic area. You have to introduce what is the topic that you want to work on and how it has got relevance to today's public health scenario or today's nutrition scenario or today's policy scenario or whatever you are working on, and briefly touch upon the previous research. This is where your earlier collected research material would be of great use. You have to briefly touch upon previous research and the current research as well, and also cite some of your work if you have already worked in these areas. Then raise the interlocking findings and unanswered questions. This is where you raise the gaps and how these gaps are existing and why these are existing, and the remaining questions or unexplored areas can be identified, and you can say your research is therefore more necessary to be conducted in these areas. Why there is a need for the current study, and what is the rationale and its significance to the existing knowledge or practice, what would it ultimately add, and clearly it should end in putting forth the hypothesis with which you are working. I hope you have learnt about the hypothesis in research methodology sessions. You should put forth your hypothesis towards the end of the introduction or rationale session, and also you could put the primary objective, the secondary objective, and the broad research questions which you want to explore. Next comes the subsection called objectives, wherein you clearly mention the primary objective of a study in a line or two. For instance, you want to understand the effect or impact of a particular nutrition education intervention on the micronutrient status of a given population. The primary objective would be to explore or to assess the impact of so and so intervention on the micronutrient status of the target population, say 6 to 10 year old children, or maybe 0 to 5 year old children, or maybe pregnant mothers or whatever. And then in the second phase, you clearly specify the secondary objectives, how you would like to reach the outcome to achieve your overall objective. That means how you want to do how you want to reach the primary objective that you have specified earlier. So each of the steps involved should be given as objectives. Then comes the methodology section. In the methodology section, the research design is the first aspect that you have to touch upon. In research design, clearly specify whether it is a clinical study or a community study or a lab-based study or a clinical trial, or is it an intervention study. Also state whether it is a prospective study or a retrospective study. A prospective study is a study that you start from today and complete it in a particular time point in future. Retrospective study is you already take an existing phenomenon, say which has happened in the past, and then start from there and then identify what has happened with that particular issue. And then cross-sectional study or a specific group-based study. You mention whether it is a cross-sectional study or a specific group-based study, or whether it is a randomized study or a case control study. All these things need to be clearly written in the research design part. Then comes the sampling method used. What is the method of sampling that you have used? So with your statistician's help, you will be able to elaborate this. The next session is the sampling methods used. To write in this session, probably you need to approach your statistician to find out how you have come up with the sample, and what is the justification for selecting a particular sample, and what is the methodology used to arrive at a particular sample that you have chosen for your study. The next one is the sample size and subjects. What exactly is the size of the sample? How many people are you recruiting for your study, or how many animals are you considering for your study, or what are the various subjects that you are considering for your study? All these things should be included in the sample size and subjects. And also the methodology part should clearly indicate the study location. Where exactly are you doing this study? Specify the location of the study. Which part of the country, state, village, you will be doing, or which setting, wherever it is applicable, you have to specifically mention the location. The setting also, whether it is a school-based study, hospital-based study, or diet center-based study, or ICDS-based study, or is it done at the homes or at the household level, or is it done in the hospitals, all these things should be very clearly mentioned. Then come the research tools. In the research tools, what you have to mention is the methods that will be used to collect data, whether it is a quantitative method or a qualitative method. If it is a quantitative method, if it is a questionnaire, you should give a brief detail about the questionnaire, how the questionnaire was developed, whether it is validated or not. If it is not validated, then whether it will be pre-tested and validated later as part of your study. Those things should be mentioned clearly in the research tools section. Along with this, you should also mention the clinical or anthropometric measures, or a combination of other activities that you would take, or would you involve lab studies, clinical studies, biochemical parameters, or anthropometric measures, and to assess these, what are the various methods or scales or various methods that you are using. All those things should be mentioned in this. Then mention how these tools will be developed, pre-tested, validated, or standardized, as I told you earlier. The next important section as part of the method section would be data collection. In this, you have to mention very clearly the process involved in data collection. Who will collect the data? If the field staff or lab staff is being employed, then how they will be trained and standardized. The mechanism for regular quality checks, if it is there, what is it and who would do it? All these things should be very clearly mentioned in the data collection process. And then data entry and analysis. Usually it is a norm these days to write that data will be analyzed using such and such package, say SPSS package or some other package. But that is the software that you would be depending on. But in data entry and analysis part, what you have to clearly write is overview of the scheme of analysis. What are the main outcome measures that you are looking at? To arrive at those outcome measures, what are the actual statistical procedures that you take up? And then you could mention in a line as to what software you would be relying on to run these statistical procedures. Then comes the most important part of the research proposal, the expected outcome. In the expected outcome column, you have to write what is likely to come out of this study. At the end of this study, what do you expect would be your contribution to science, or your contribution to policy, or your contribution to the existing knowledge. That has to clearly come out very crisply, probably not more than a paragraph or so. How the results of this study will help fill the existing gaps in research or policy or practice. That's what I said should be very clearly be part of the expected outcome. Then it is also appropriate to include ethical considerations in the proposal. In ethical considerations, you have to be very clear, is any ethical clearance required for the study? Studies involving human subjects may need ethical clearance. Does the study use invasive methods or interview techniques? And if so, if it is a community study, is there any consent process involved? Is a written consent that you are taking? Or in case of children, then parents' consent is also a must. Perhaps specify the institute or university whose institutional review board you would approach to get the ethical clearance for your study. Ethical clearance is also a must. Eventually, when you complete your research and want to publish it, every publisher would ask you as to which review board or which ethical committee has looked at your proposal, whether your proposal has been cleared by the ethical committee or not. So this is most important in today's research, even if it is a small time MSc dissertation work. Then you have to write about the duration and time frame of your research. In duration of the study, what is the exact duration by which the study is to be completed from the date of initiation, when you want to initiate and when you want to complete. And in time frame, estimated timelines for each of your steps in the research. What is the time that you would take to complete the preparatory phase? What is the time you would actually need to complete your baseline data collection? For the exact intervention or a clinical trial, how much time would you take? Or for the exact completion of your experimental processes, how much time would you take? And then post-intervention, data collection, or maybe data entry and analysis, and final submission of the report, what time would you be taking? Everything, if it is laid out in realistic terms, be realistic when you are writing terms depending on your resources, depending on your time, depending on your abilities, you have to come up with a realistic time frame so that it gives a clear indication to the funder or to your research guide as to what exactly you are looking at and when you are likely to complete this volume of work. Then comes most importantly the references or a bibliography section. Bibliography and references can be arranged alphabetically. There are various methods, the APA style or the usual journal styles that they use, or there are many other styles, and each university for a dissertation work has a particular style of referencing. So you follow the referencing pattern and put all your references that you've studied for writing this proposal in an order, either alphabetically, or if you've used number systems in the text, if you have used numbers to cite your references in the text, it has to come in the number opposite the number that it has been reflected. Then references can also be presented numerically, that's what I said. And finally, the most important is the budgetary estimate section, wherein you provide estimates under specific heads in currency of the funding agency, whether it is, if it is an Indian funding agency, it should be in rupees. If it's a foreign funding agency, probably it should be in dollars or euros or whatever is applicable for each year of the project and under what head you would be spending. For instance, budgetary estimate should be clearly given for recurring and non-recurring expenses. Under recurring expenses, you have something called salaries or transport or maybe the chemicals that you would be taking, the glassware and things like that. Under non-recurring, you would have one-time investments, like perhaps you would like to buy some machinery or something like that. Those things will be there. The equipment purchases and things like that would come under non-recurring. And then travel expenditure should be accounted. Every expenditure you try and account for, and then give realistic terms. Don't give vague amounts which may sometimes be suitable or which may not be suitable sometimes. So you need to do some amount of work to arrive at the budgetary estimate for each of the heads that you are calculating. So this makes a project proposal very, very ideal. What are the common mistakes that people usually do when they are doing a research proposal? Failure to provide a proper context to frame the research question is often a common mistake, and that's how even if there is a weightage in your methodology, if you fail to provide the context in which you are framing your research question, the evaluator or the person who's trying to give funds to you for your research may not be taking your research proposal very seriously. Failure to cite landmark studies. In every field there will be some landmark studies. If you have missed out on those landmark studies in your review of literature, you have really missed out on something. So don't ever miss out on them. But the landmark studies could be identified either by the number of references that they have got, the number of citations that they have got, and the journal in which it is. If it is a very reputed journal and if it has got many citations, it definitely is a work that you cannot afford to miss. So don't miss out on landmark studies. Then failure to accurately present others' research in the area. You may be citing others' research, but you should be presenting that research accurately. You cannot twist facts. And failure to stay focused on the research question. You may have a research question in mind, but if your proposal gives an opinion or impression that you've digressed from your research question and then you are looking into various other things which are not pertinent to the question that you've raised, then the research proposal can be shot down. Then failure to develop a coherent and persuasive argument and rationale. If you can't give proper rationale for your work, then also the research proposal can go haywire. Too much detail on minor issues but not enough detail on major issues is something that many people do. There are research proposals usually written by students with lots of introduction but very little on methodology, and methodology is usually written in very vague terms. No, you need to strike a balance, and then you have to give enough detail, just about enough detail on each and every segment that I mentioned earlier. Too many citation lapses and incorrect references also can actually be very, very disappointing to the person who's reading your research proposal. Too long or too short proposals, both are not a very good idea. So some tips are, please take enough time, don't do things in a hurried way. Start by writing a summary of your proposed project first. First write down a small summary or a concept note and try to develop that. Demonstrate an up-to-date knowledge of the field. So don't miss out on latest work and the landmark works. Present your aims and objectives clearly and concisely. So that's the main thing that actually impresses a particular reviewer of your proposal. Avoid jargon. Say what you mean in clear and simple language. Don't be afraid to state the obvious. Use appropriate charts and graphs, but don't overuse them. Anticipate questions that may arise, and you try to answer them in your proposal. That you try to preempt the questions. That's the simple thing that you could do. Ask a colleague or an expert to review. Don't be too attached to your proposal and then don't keep it to yourself. Try and get it reviewed by somebody who has some knowledge in that area, or give it to somebody who is totally lay to the area, but see whether your proposal can be easily understood or not. And be enthusiastic about your idea. If you don't sound interested, why should anyone else be interested in your work? So friends, by now I am sure you all know what goes into writing a research proposal. So a very well laid out research proposal is half war won, because if you write your research proposal very well, clearly documenting each and every step of your proposed research, you will have a clear cut path to go about finding your solution for the problem with which you've set out to. If you have a very well written research proposal, it is almost half of your future research paper done. Once the research is completed, your introduction is in place, your methodology section is in place. All that you need to do is write a good results section and then add a bit of discussion to it, and then conclude your research to write a good research report or a paper. So you pay attention to writing a very good research proposal and your half dissertation is almost done.